Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Murders Podcast with me, your host, Sidney Smith. I want to thank you guys for jumping out here and joining me again. It's been a wild ride and a fun ride doing it inside the studio. I love it. Thank you guys who are following the channel, Sidney Smith Creative, and checking out all of the content that I have there. I do appreciate that. Thank you guys for coming back each week looking for this. If you do not see the video version of the show, doesn't mean that there's not a show that week, just means that it's not on video. So go and find Murders Podcast wherever it is you listen to your favorite podcast. We're all over Apple, Spotify, iHeart, etc., etc., etc. So thank you guys for joining us. We do appreciate it. I got a fun one ready to go for you. If you're new to the podcast, on this podcast, I bring on a co-host every once in a while. I had Ashley Rose last week. It is me rocking solo this week. So thank you guys for coming on out and enjoying just me and my voice, my face, and enjoying the show. This show here, we talk about real life murders committed by women. I stick mainly to women, and I'll say mainly because every once in a while, I'll stick an episode in where there was a duo, where it was a female and her lover, most likely her husband. So, but that's what we do here. So thank you guys again for joining us. Before we get started, I want to remind you guys who have not subscribed yet to the YouTube channel, do that right now. Just go ahead and click that subscribe. Nothing makes me happier than seeing that number go up and up and up. So do me a favor, make me happy, make that number go up. If you guys are listening to this as just a podcast, then go ahead and click that subscribe button as well and give us a nice 5-star rating. I would appreciate that. After you've done either or both of those things, why don't you just take a link, send it off to a friend. Let them know, hey, there's this true crime podcast I'm listening to. There's this comedian. That's what I do. I'm a stand-up comic. I'm a writer. I'm a director as well. And he also does 2 podcasts, but I love one of them for sure. If you love this one, you'll love my other one. Now That's Debatable, which you can also find wherever you listen, again, to your favorite podcast. Thank you guys again. I appreciate it. So shout out to everybody who's listening to the first time after watching me perform at Stand Up Live this past weekend. It was an amazing time. Stand Up Live in Phoenix, by the way. Let me say that because they have another one in Huntsville, Alabama. Stand Up Live is one of my clubs here that I like to work. It's my home club. I really enjoy it. Love the staff, Wes and the whole crew over there. Shout out to those guys. Shout out to all the comics I work with, Savannah Hernandez, Brian Ritchie, and of course the headliner, Pete Corielli. Had a great time, met some great people afterwards, took a lot of pics. So if you guys are listening, if you did not throw those up on IG or you did and you did not tag me, please go back and tag me in those. I would love to see some of those pics as well. But it was a great time and I'll be back on stage real soon. In the meantime, I will be taking some time away from the stage, just a little bit here and there, to shoot some sketches. And you guys who are looking at this right now on YouTube will be able to find those sketches here on Sidney Smith Creative over the summer. So we'll be doing some of that. My movie drops in the fall, my second short film. I should say that. Every time I say movie, I feel weird about it. I mean, it is a movie, but you don't want to say movie like, you know, like I'm James Cameron or something like that. You don't want to oversell it, I guess. I'm not quite there yet, but it is my second short film. The first one we did, Mother's Day, is already up on Sidney Smith Creative. You can go check that out. I'm very proud of that. It was the first movie I was able to write and get finished. It's a short. It's about just short of 8 minutes long, but really enjoyed it. Ended up having to star in it myself along with one of my very, very good friends, like a little brother to me, but a very talented actor, Revis Dorsey. So very happy about that. Had a chance to work with a young DP named Sly. He helped put that together with me as well. And so from there, went to the next one, which is Section 17, and it's about 30 minutes long. And I'm already looking at what the full feature is going to be, but I'm not quite sure. We'll probably start shooting that in the fall. But looking forward to Section 17 dropping in the fall. It should be done, being edited and everything soon, but I'm going to hold on to it because I want to make sure that everyone's back and we're nice in a nice chilly weather before we go ahead and have a chance to check that out. But with all that said, I'm still around, still doing things. Appreciate that. My game show, which I created called the National Spelling Buzz, will be coming to my YouTube channel as well. So keep an eye out for that. Having a lot of fun with that. We've got 2 episodes recorded. Those are in the lab right now being polished up. And then we'll be back September. Make sure I got this date right. I believe September 29th is when we're going to be back shooting the 3rd episode. So again, you can find out about all of this stuff by going to my website, Sidney Smith Creative. And you're going to want to spell creative, CRE, the number 8 TIV, and keep up with all that stuff. So again, Lots going on, and thank you guys for your support. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. You guys are amazing. If you guys didn't do any of that, I would just be just a weirdo talking to themselves, and you guys would be making fun of me till they put me in some kind of weird home. So thank you guys very much. All right, we're going to jump right into the story this week. Got a good one. Kind of a weird one because I never heard this story before. Like a lot of them, I haven't heard before, but this one I definitely hadn't. And the age of the offender is what really got me. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. This week's murderess is the young Mary Bell. Mary Flora Bell was an 11-year-old monster who caused a sensation in 1968 when she killed two small boys in Newcastle upon Tyne. Bell was convicted of both murders in December of 1968 in a trial held at Newcastle when she was 11 years old, and in which her actions were judged to have been committed under diminished responsibility. Her accomplice in at least one of the murders was 13-year-old Norma Joyce Bell. Excuse me, folks, here with the mic. That's no relation. That's no relation at all. But she was acquitted of all charges. She remains Britain's youngest female killer, though not the youngest female murderer, having been convicted of manslaughter of both boys. Bell was released from custody in 1980 at the age of 23. A lifelong court order granted her anonymity, which has since been extended to protect the identity of her daughter and granddaughter. She has since lived under a series of pseudonyms. Now, before I get into the story, I don't know that I've ever heard of anything in America where you can commit a crime, even at a young age, and you can have your entire life, you can be anonymous for the rest of your life once released. I'm sure people try it. And maybe because in America, we don't do it, or it's never been done because you're going to have a hard time falling off the face of the earth in this country. But I'm always a little bit thrown, I shouldn't say surprised, a little bit thrown whenever I see that a court has allowed for something like that, because I myself personally would want and should, and I feel like we all should know. If you were 11 years old and you killed anyone, I need to know that. I need to know that if you're going to be released. And sometimes I think we get away from that because of some of these murders when in these cases, because they're minors. But I'm not quite sure we should grant them that same right, that same privilege that we would for anyone else. Bell's mother, Elizabeth Betty Bell, was a well-known local prostitute who was often absent from the family home, frequently traveling to Glasgow to work and simply leaving her children in the care of their father if he was present. Mary was her second child, born when Betty was 17 years old. The identity of Mary's biological father is unknown. For most of her life, Mary believed her father to be William Billy Bell, a violent alcoholic and habitual criminal with an arrest record for crimes including armed robbery. However, she was a baby when William Bell married her mother, and is unknown if he is her actual biological father. Mary was an unwanted and neglected child. According to her aunt, Isa McCricket, within minutes of Mary's birth, her mother had resented hospital staff attempting to place her daughter in her arms, shouting, "Take that thing away from me." As a baby, toddler, and young child, Mary frequently suffered injuries and household accidents while alone with her mother, which led her family to believe that either her mother was deliberately negligent or intentionally attempting to harm or kill her daughter. On one occasion in about 1960, Betty dropped her daughter from her first floor window. On another occasion, she plied her daughter with sleeping pills. She's also known to have once sold Mary to a mentally unstable woman who was unable to have children of her own, resulting in her older sister, Catherine, having to travel alone across Newcastle to reclaim Mary from this individual and return the child to her mother's home on White House Road. Despite all of this and the abuse of their child, Betty refused repeated offers from her family to take custody of Mary, whom she, as a dominatrix, is alleged to have begun allowing and encouraging several of her clients to sexually abuse in sadomasochistic sessions by the mid-1960s. So we can already start to see, for those of you who've listened to the podcast before, we're already starting to see what her world looks like. And we're starting to already see as well what her future is probably going to look like. Because as we always say, you can be formed by your present, by your past, and your present sometimes will also form you on what your future is going to be. So we're starting to kind of see that here. This is one of the more dramatic things that I've researched and had to do on the show. We've gotten to some dark areas. Nothing so much as this here, where the mother is, back as we would say in the Midwest, has taught the daughter how to turn tricks. Both at home and at school, Mary exhibited numerous signs of disturbed and unpredictable behavior, including sudden mood swings and chronic bedwetting. She is known to have frequently fought with other children, both boys and girls, and to have attempted to strangle or suffocate her classmates or playmates on several occasions. On one occasion, she is known to have attempted to block the trachea of a young girl with sand. This violent behavior made many children reluctant to socialize with Mary, who would frequently spend her free time with Norma Joyce Bell, again, no relation, folks, the 13-year-old daughter of a next-door neighbor. Although the girls shared the same surname, they, again, were not related. So I've never heard, again, these are some new things for me as well, and new for my listeners. Now, there may be some folks who've heard this story. If you're a rabid fan of true crime, maybe you've heard this one on another podcast. My first time hearing about this one myself. I try not to listen to a lot of other true crime podcasts because I much like I do with my comedy, except for the greats, I don't listen to a lot of stand-up. I don't want anyone else's style, anyone else's anything to filter into what I do. So this one, again, is a new story to me. But I have never heard before of a child attempting to block another child's breathing by putting sand into their throat. That's new. And I would assume she had to pick that up somewhere, or maybe she was just creative. I have no idea. According to one classmate at Delaval Road Junior School, by 1968, she and her peers had become accustomed to the sudden and marked changes in Mary's behavior. And when she began exhibiting distressful mannerisms, including shaking her head and forming a steely gaze, her peers instinctively knew she was to become violent, with the focus of her stare being the individual she would attack. On Saturday, May 11th, 1968, a 3-year-old boy was discovered wandering dazed and bleeding in the vicinity of St. Margaret's Road. The child later informed police that he had been playing with Mary Bell and Norma Bell atop a disused air raid shelter when one of the girls had pushed him 7 feet from the roof to the ground and inflicting a severe laceration to his head. The same evening, the parents of 3 small girls contacted police to complain that both Mary and Norma had attempted to strangle their children as they played in a sand pit. That evening, both girls were interviewed about these incidents. Both girls denied any culpability for the air raid shelter incident, claiming they had simply discovered the boy bleeding heavily from a head wound after he had fallen. Further questioned about the attempted strangulation of the 3 young girls, Mary denied any knowledge of the incident. However, Norma admitted Mary had tried to throttle each of the girls, stating, Mary went to one of the girls and said, "What happens if you choke someone? Do they die?" Then Mary put both hands around the girl's throat and squeezed. The girl started to turn purple. I told Mary to stop, but she wouldn't. Then she put her hands around Pauline's throat, and she started going purple as well. Another girl, Susan Cornish, came up and Mary did the same thing to her. Now, are you thinking what I'm thinking? How is this little girl squeezing 3 different girls' necks and no one is doing anything to this young lady? No one is fighting back. No one can get their hands on her. How many hands does she have? This is the weirdest thing. 3 girls all being squeezed till they turn purple, and no one is doing anything in terms of fighting back. Police notified the local authority of the incidents and of Mary's violent nature. But due to her age, both girls were simply given a warning. No further action was taken. Now, in the 1960s, Newcastle upon Tyne experienced a significant urban renewal project. Many inner boroughs of the city saw Victorian-era terrace slums demolished in order that modern houses and flats could be constructed. Although several families resided in buildings earmarked for demolition as they awaited rehousing by the council. A lot of the kids frequently played in or close to abandoned homes, derelict homes, and upon the rubble strewn, expanses of land raised and partially cleared by contractors. So if you've lived in the inner city or been closer to the inner city, you can picture what I just read there. If you've never had any type of contact with that type of area, then it's going to be harder for you to get, unless you've seen it in movies. But in a lot of areas where that urban renewal, if you will, is starting to take place, they tear down all the homes that a lot of these families could afford. But because the families are somewhat displaced, if you will, because they're still there, they're still in the neighborhood. They haven't been, either they can't find, in some cases, they can't find someplace else to go. In this case, it looks like it was taking a little while for them to be moved to someplace else. So you're going to have kids out there. They're going to play in vacant lots. I've seen kids playing in vacant lots. I've seen kids waiting for the snow to come, and those kids, they may slide down the hill in the snow and things like that. So no matter what the area is, kids figure out a way to play in it, and it sounds like what they were doing here. And one of these locations was a large expanse of waste ground located close to a railway line known to local children as Tin Lizzie. The street, which ran parallel to this expanse of waste ground, was St. Margaret's Road. So these kids were playing in trash. It sounds like. On May 25th of 1968, the day before her 11th birthday, Mary Bell strangled 4-year-old Martin Brown in an upstairs bedroom of a derelict house located at 85 St. Margaret's Road. She is believed to have committed this crime alone. Brown's body was discovered by 3 children at approximately 3:30 p.m. He was lying on his back with his arms stretched above his head. Aside from specks of blood and foam around his mouth, no signs of violence were visible upon his body. A local workman named John Hall soon arrived on the scene. He attempted to perform CPR, but to no avail. As Hall attempted the CPR, 2 local girls, 10-year-old Mary Bell, known locally, she had a nickname, May, and her 13-year-old friend, which we spoke about before, Norma Bell, appeared at the doorway to the bedroom. Both were quickly shooed out of the house. The 2 knocked on the door of Martin's aunt, a Mrs. Rita Finlay, and informed her, "One of your sister's kids has just had an accident. We think it's Martin, but we can't tell because there's blood all over him." The following day, Dr. Bernard Knight conducted a post-mortem upon the body of Martin Brown. Knight was unable to find any signs of violence on the child's body, and thus was unable to determine the child's cause of death. Although he was able to discount the investigators' theory the child had died of poisoning through ingesting tablets. An inquest on June 7th returned an open verdict. So can't figure it out. Did not close the case, but just couldn't figure it out at that time. On Mary's 11th birthday, May 26th, she and Norma broke into. So it looks like they did a couple different things here. So broke into and vandalized a nursery in nearby Woodland Crescent. The 2 entered the premises by peeling tiles off the slate roof. They tore books, upturned desks, and smeared ink and poster paints about the property before escaping. These 2 little hoodlums are just running around. Now, I know Mary's mother isn't worth shit because, being a prostitute and all and turning her daughter out. But I don't know where Norma's fucking mother and that father are. Because this is just every day. It seems like these kids are out doing something that they have no business doing and doing things you expect older kids to be doing. The following day, staff discovered the break-in and vandalism and immediately notified the police, who also discovered 4 separate notes which claimed responsibility for Martin Brown's murder. One of these notes stated, "I murder so that I may come back." Another read, "We did murder Martin Brown. Fuck off, you bastard." A third note simply read, "Fuck off, we murder. Watch out, Fanny and faggot." The final note was the most complex reading. "You are mice. Why? Because we and," I'm assuming it should be say, "and all faggot you screws." The police dismissed this incident as a tasteless and childish prank. I would say tasteless and illiterate prank myself, but now May 29th, shortly before the funeral of Martin Brown, in a game of chicken, both girls called upon the house of his mother. Now remember, I just read Martin Brown's the little boy who was murdered. Now we're at May 29th. Shortly before his funeral, now these girls are calling, playing a game of chicken as I'm reading here, as I found. And so both girls called upon the house of his mother, June, asking to see her son. When June Brown replied that they couldn't see her son because he was deceased, Mary replied, "Oh, I know he's dead. I want to see him in his coffin." Think about that. 10, 11-year-old child. That's some movie type shit right there. That's some Damien. That's some Omen type shit. That's that one of my favorite movies is Orphan, by the way. That girl, well, I don't want to ruin it. Well, you know what? Fuck it. If you haven't seen it by now. But that is that's a really good movie. But that is some Orphan type shit right there. On the afternoon of July 31st, 1968, a 3-year-old named Brian Howe was last seen by his parents in the street outside his house, playing with one of his siblings, the family dog. With his siblings, the family dog, and Mary Bell and Norma Bell. The way I read that made it sound like with one of his siblings, the family dog, as if the dog was his. So forgive me on that. I didn't mean to do that. When he did not return home later that afternoon, concerned relatives and neighbors searched the streets without success. At 11:10 p.m., a search party discovered Brian's body between two large concrete blocks upon the Tin Lizzie. Again, the Tin Lizzie, that area where the kids were playing in trash. The first policeman to arrive at the scene observed that a deliberate but feeble attempt had been made to conceal the body, which was covered in clumps of grass and weeds. Cyanosis was evident upon the child's lips, and several bruises and scratches were evident upon his neck. A pair of broken scissors lay close to his feet. The coroner would conclude that Brian had died of strangulation and that had been deceased for up to 7.5 hours before the discovery of his body. The killer had evidently squeezed Brian's nostrils closed with one hand, as he or she had gripped his throat with the other. Numerous puncture wounds had been inflicted to the child's legs before death. Sections of his hair had been cut from his head, his genitals had been partially mutilated, and a crude attempt had been made to carve the initial M in his stomach. The relatively small amount of force used to murder the child led the coroner to conclude the murderer was another child. Let me back up for a second here. When you're talking about the mutilation of genitals, when you're talking about carving letters into another human being, cutting sections of the hair, this is a snowball rolling downhill, is what Mary was. And I think this lends itself to my thought at the top of the show, which was, I don't know why you would allow anyone who could do such things like this at a young age to live a life where he or she would be anonymous for the rest of it when you allow he or she to leave prison. This is dangerous stuff. And I don't think you grow out of it. I don't think you can be taught to pull yourself out of it. It's just weird to me. Numerous gray and maroon fibers were discovered upon Brian's clothing and shoes. These fibers did not source from any clothing within the Howe household and had been transferred to the child by his murderers. The discovery of Brian Howe's body sparked a large-scale manhunt. Over 100 detectives from across Northumberland were assigned to the investigation, and more than 1,200 children had been questioned with regard to their whereabouts by August 2nd. 2 children questioned by detectives on August 1st were Mary Bell and Norma Bell, whom witnesses had already informed investigators had been seen playing with Brian shortly before he was believed to have died. In her initial interview, Norma seemed excitable, whereas Mary was markedly more observant and laid back. Although both girls were evasive and contradictory in their initial statements, they freely admitted to having played with Brian on the date of his death, but denied having seen him after lunchtime. Questioned further the following day, Mary stated she remembered seeing an 8-year-old local boy playing with Brian on the afternoon of July 31st, and that she had also seen him hitting the child. Furthermore, she stated she also remembered that the boy had been covered in grass and weeds after he had been rolling in a field, and that he had in his possession a small pair of scissors. Mary then expounded, "I saw him trying to cut a cat's tail off with the scissors." Mary then, "But there was something wrong with them. One leg was broken or bent." This self-incriminating statement convinced Detective Chief Inspector James Dobson that Mary was the actual killer, as only the police knew the broken scissors found at the crime scene. In addition, the local boy she named was quickly questioned and was discovered to have been at Newcastle International Airport on the afternoon of July 31st, with numerous witnesses able to corroborate his parents' claims. On the afternoon of August 4th, the parents of Norma Bell contacted police, stating their daughter wished to confess what she knew of the death of Brian Howe. DCI Dobson arrived at her home, formally cautioned Norma, I assume that means read her rights, then asked what she knew. Norma then informed Dobson Mary had taken her to a spot on the Tin Lizzie, at which point she had been shown Brian's body. Mary had then demonstrated to her how she had strangled the child. According to Norma, Mary had confessed to her she had enjoyed strangling the child, before describing how she inflicted the scour marks to his stomach with a razor blade, which had been hidden at the crime scene, and the broken scissors. So she did not just use the scissors, the broken ones. She also used the blade to put that in this young man's flesh. Norma then led the police to the crime scene and revealed the location where the razor blade was hidden. A drawing Norma made of the wounds inflicted to the boy's abdomen precisely matched those described by the coroner. Mary Bell was visited at her home in the early hours of August 5th. On this occasion, she was notably defensive when confronted with the discrepancies in her previous statement. She informed detectives, "You're trying to brainwash me. I will get a solicitor to get me out of this." What? Again, where's she learning these things? Later the same day, Norma was questioned again. On this occasion, she made a full statement in which she admitted being present when Mary had actually strangled Brian. And I'm glad she did, because that is exactly where my brain was at with this story initially. Was, all right, it's fine. You weren't there. You had nothing to do with it. You're like any other criminal. You were there. And so I'm glad she did come back again, gave the full statement. I wonder if she sat down with her parents and gave them the full story and then they decided that she needed to tell the whole truth. According to Norma, when the trio were alone on the Tin Lizzie, Mary seemed to go all funny, pushing the child into the grass and attempting to strangle him before stating to her, "My hands are getting thick. Take over." She had then run from the scene, leaving Mary alone with Brian. A forensic examination of clothing owned by both girls revealed the gray fibers discovered on Brian's body were a precise match to a woolen dress owned by Mary. The maroon fibers upon the child's shoes were a precise match to a skirt owned by Norma. Furthermore, the same gray fibers had also been found upon the body of Martin Brown. Brian Howe was buried in a local cemetery on August 7, 1968, in a ceremony attended by over 200 people. According to DCI Dobson, and he was actually planning to arrest both girls later that day. Mary Bell stood outside the Howe household as the child's coffin was brought from the home at the beginning of the funeral procession. Dobson later stated she stood there laughing and rubbing her hands. I thought, my God, I've got to bring her in. She'll do another one. You think? So both girls were formally charged with the murder of Brian Howe at 8 p.m. that same evening. In response to this charge, Mary replied, "That's all right by me." Norma burst in tears, simply proclaiming, I'll pay you back for this." In the presence of an independent witness, Mary prepared a written statement in which she admitted to being present when Brian Howe was murdered, but insisting the murder had been committed by Norma. She also admitted she and Norma had broken into the Woodland Crescent nursery the day after the murder of Martin Brown, defacing the property before the two had written the 4 handwritten notes. Shortly after their arrest, both girls underwent, obviously, psychological evaluations. One of them for sure is already fucking nuts. I mean, I don't know what we're talking about here. I mean, from everything that the cops saw from her standing, what person, what child, what individual have you heard of who stands across the street from the funeral, watching the coffin, rubbing their hands like a psycho? So I'm not quite sure if we needed the evaluation, but maybe the court wanted it. The results of these tests revealed Norma was intellectually delayed and a submissive character who easily displayed emotion, whereas Mary was a bright yet cunning character prone to sudden mood swings. Occasionally, Mary was willing to talk, although she rapidly became sullen, introspective, and defensive in nature. This is so classic. How many movies, how many TV shows, hell, how many real life stories have we heard when there's two? There's always got to be one that's dominant and then one who's a submissive. So this is so classic here. And Mary being the aggressive, being the smart one, being the dominant one, even at the young age of 10 or 11. And I'm not going to say she got it all from her mother or from her upbringing, but that young to know how to seek out and find someone who's going to be submissive, who's going to do as you say, who's going to follow you and not tell on you. That's a scary thing. It's a very scary thing. And I guess we do see it in children even now, not on this level where they're committing murder, but you see it in kids now. I mean, hell, we saw it when we were kids. You have a group. You have one that's the leader and you have the several others that are followers. You may have one he may be a co-leader possibly. But it is a scary thing when you have that, what seems natural to a lot of us, turn into something so evil. So the 4 psychiatrists who examined Mary concluded that, although not suffering from a mental disorder, she suffered from a psychopathic personality disorder. And this official report compiled for the Director of Public Prosecutions, Dr. David Westbury, concluded Mary's social techniques are primitive and take the form of automatic denial, ingratiation, manipulation, complaining, bullying, flight, or violence. The trial of Mary Bell and Norma Bell for the murders of Martin Brown and Brian Howe began at Newcastle Assizes on December 5th, 1968. Both girls were tried before Mr. Justice Ralph Cusack, and both pleaded not guilty to the charges. Mary was defended by Mr. Harvey Robson, Norma by R.P. Smith. Again, protests from both defense counsels on the first day of the trial. Cusack waived the defendant's right to anonymity, on account of their age. As such, the media were allowed to publicize the names, ages, and photographs of both girls. Good. Who each sat alongside plainclothes female officers in the center of the court, behind their legal representatives, and within arm's reach of their families throughout the duration of the trial. Rudolph Lyons opened the case on behalf of the prosecution at 11:30 a.m. In an opening statement lasting 6 hours, Lyons informed the jury they faced an unhappy and distressing task due to the nature of the murders and the ages of the defendants. 11 and 13 again for those who were not keeping track. He then outlined the prosecution's intention to illustrate the similarities between both murders, which indicated both boys had been murdered by the same perpetrator or perpetrators. Lyons outlined the circumstances surrounding both deaths and the evidence indicating the defendant's guilt. Although Lyons conceded in his opening statement that despite the defendant's age difference, Mary was the more dominant of the two, he contended both girls had acted in unison and were equally culpable, killing both children solely for the pleasure and excitement of murder. He added both girls well knew that what they did was wrong and what the results would be. Not only that, I wish he had added this too. I wish he had added the stress that was put upon the families with the first little boy that died, calling the mother, playing the prank, asking where he was, and then saying, "Hey, I know he's dead. I want to see him in his coffin." And of course, I'm paraphrasing here to a certain point. And then standing outside the family home of the other little boy when they're bringing his coffin out and laughing and rubbing their hands. On the fifth day of trial, Norma testified in her own defense. She denied any culpability in the actual murder of either child, but admitted under cross-examination to having known Mary's penchant for violence and her history of attacking children, and that the two had discussed attacking and killing small children of both genders. Questioned by Rudolph Lyons as to whether Mary had demonstrated to her how children could be killed, Norma nodded. She then conceded that as Mary had begun to attack and strangle Brian Howe, she had failed to alert a group of boys playing in the vicinity, stating she had failed to do so as I did not know what was going to happen in the first place. She had stopped hurting him for a bit when the boys were near the concrete blocks. Questioned as to her own role in the murder, Norma stated she had never touched the child. Following the conclusion of Norma's testimony on December 12th, Mary testified in her own defense. Her testimony lasted for almost 12 hours, concluding on December 13th, and was briefly adjourned on one occasion when she began crying in a policewoman's arms. And I'm sure that was all for fake, all for show. She denied her co-defendant's accusations, insisting that although she had observed the body of Martin Brown at St. Margaret's Road, she herself had never harmed the child, and that she and Norma had later asked the boy's mother to view his body as the two were daring each other, and one of us did not want to be a chicken. Mary also conceded she had divulged to others her knowledge of Martin's death could get Norma put straight away. Questions with regards to the death of Brian Howe. Mary claimed that Norma had been the individual who had strangled the child, as she herself was just standing there looking. So now it wasn't me, it was you, pointing the finger at this point. I couldn't move. It was as if some glue was pulling us down. Mary then alleged Norma had encouraged Brian to lie down if he wanted some sweets, telling him, "You got to lie down for the lady to come with the sweets," before proceeding to strangle him with her bare hands as she herself unsuccessfully attempted to prevent the attack. Mary further stated she could determine the level of force Norma was exhibiting because her fingertips and nails were going white, and again conceded she had failed to inform authorities of her knowledge of Norma's actions out of both fear and misguided sense of loyalty. Even with the two stories here, and there's some quotes in here from both girls, you can see the detail that is laid in there by Mary. Not that she's writing a Stephen King novel or a Dean Koontz novel for folks out there who are rabid readers of both. I love Stephen King. I have a harder time reading Koontz because he is so detailed oriented. And don't get me wrong, I love details, but he breaks it down to the speed of the sweat that was rolling off the back of a man's neck. That's how detailed Dean can get. But not that Mary is Dean Koontz, but you can see she's far more intelligent, far more rehearsed. And I'm assuming she had the benefit of hearing the questions that were thrown at Norma beforehand. And also seeing the way that Norma testified as well, and was able to make some corrections and make some judgment calls and be better prepared with her story. Though I think it's another tale also. Norma's mother, Catherine, then testified that several months prior to the murder of Brian Howe, she and her husband had discovered Mary attempting to strangle Norma's younger sister. Okay. I got to read this again. So Norma's mother, Catherine, then testified several months prior to the murder of Brian Howe, she and her husband had discovered Mary attempting to strangle Norma's younger sister. So Norma has a younger sister, Susan here is her name, and that she had only released her grip on their daughter's throat after her husband had punched Mary in the shoulder. I'd have punched her in the head personally. A child psychiatrist named Ian Fraser then testified that Norma's mental age was 8 years and 10 months, and that although her capacity of knowing right from wrong was limited, she was capable of appreciating the criminality of the act she was accused of committing. So again, going back, Norma, though she is the age she is, her mental age was 8 years. On December 13th, Norma's defense counsel, R.P. Smith, delivered his closing arguments to the jury. Smith emphasized that although both girls were on trial together, no real evidence existed against his client, and the only evidence against Norma was Mary's accusations against her. Smith implored the jurors to suppress feelings of outrage and malice and dispel any idea that both little girls pay for the actions of one of them. Harvey Robson then delivered his closing argument on behalf of Mary. Robson illustrated her broken background and dysfunctional family, and the blur between fantasy and reality in her mind. Robson also referenced the testimony of Dr. David Westbury, who had testified on behalf of the defense. He had interviewed Mary on several occasions prior to the trial and had informed a definite view of the child. She suffered from a serious personality disorder, which he classified as a retarded development of her mind, and that this had been caused by both genetic and environmental factors. This abnormality, Westbury had contended, had impaired Mary's actual responsibility for her acts. So the argument when it comes to children, is it nature or is it nurture? He's almost saying that it's both. Not almost, he is. When you say genetic and environmental factors, you're saying that it is nature and nurture, when the argument has always been one or the other. And I think for him, it's the only argument that could have been made. Because if you say that it was just the one, then could the other not have come into play? Because I'm a firm believer in that. Because I'm also, if you've ever listened to my other podcast, Now It's Debatable, you'll hear a lot of different things that we speak about. But there's three men on there, myself included. And I am the conservative of the bunch, ex-Republican, conservative nonetheless. Then my brother / comedian Dion Curry is the socialist. Warren B. Hall, our big brother / comedian, is the far left, if you will, the liberal of the three of us. So I'm always a believer in whether you have a deficiency in one or the other. I'm never one to give any credence to that being an excuse to why you could not do better or be better. So the genetic and environmental factors here, both being brought, nature and nurture, he's saying it is both. I disagree with that wholeheartedly in my own humble opinion. Referencing the notes both girls had left in the nursery after the murder of Martin Brown, Robson stated the notes proved the crimes were a childish fantasy, and in Mary's case, were written to attract attention to herself. If they were for attention to herself, then why does she not let that be known that she has something to do with this? In his closing argument, Rudolph Lyons described the case as a macabre and grotesque one, in which Mary, clearly the more domineering of the two despite being a younger girl, wielded a very compelling influence, reminiscent of the fictional Svengali over Norma, whom he conceded was a subnormal intelligence, stating, "I forecast to you that the younger girl, although 2 years and 2 months younger than the other, was nevertheless the cleverer and more dominating personality." Outlining the numerous lies Mary had told the police and court alike, Lyons further remarked of Mary's lack of remorse and her high degree of cunning. And that's where I go back to with the numerous lies. If the letters were designed to bring attention to her, then the lies are not necessary. The trial lasted 9 days. On December 17th, the jury retired to consider their verdict and would deliberate for 3 hours and 25 minutes before reaching their verdicts. 3 hours. I'm surprised it took that long. Mary Bell was cleared of murder but convicted of the manslaughter of both boys on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Norma Bell was acquitted of all charges. Upon hearing the jury's verdicts, Norma clapped her hands in excitement, whereas Mary burst into tears as mother and grandmother also wept. Passing sentence, Judge Cusack described Bell as a dangerous individual, and she posed a very grave risk to other children, and that steps must be taken to protect the public from her. She was sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure effectively an indefinite sentence of imprisonment. Bell was initially detained in a Durham remand home before being transferred to a second remand home in South Norwood. She was then transferred to Red Bank Secure Unit, a young offenders institution in Newton Llewellyn. In early 1969, where she was the only female among approximately 24 inmates, Bell would later claim that she was sexually abused by a member of staff and several inmates while incarcerated at this facility, and claiming the sexual abuse began when she was age 13. In November 1973, at age 16, she was transferred to a secure wing of HM Prison in Cheshire. Excuse me. Reportedly, Bell resented her transfer to this facility, and while incarcerated at HM Prison, Bell unsuccessfully applied for parole. In June of 1976, Bell was transferred to Moore Court Open Prison, where she undertook a secretarial course. 15 months later, in September of 1977, Bell again made national headlines when she and another inmate, Annette Priest, briefly escaped from this open prison. Both escapees spent several days in the company of two young men in Blackpool, visiting the amusements and sleeping in various local hotels, where Bell used the alias Mary Robinson before the two escapees parted company. Bell was arrested at the Derbyshire home of one of the men, Clive Shirtcliffe, on September 13. Having by this stage dyed her hair blonde in an effort to disguise her identity, she was returned to custody that evening. Priest was arrested and released days later. Bell's penalty for absconding was a loss of prison privileges for 28 days. That is it's pretty light to me, especially for a child killer. In June of 1979, the Home Office announced their decision to transfer Mary Bell to HM Prison Askham Grange, an open category prison in the village of Askham Richard, in efforts to prepare her for her eventual release into society, which was planned for the following year. Beginning in November 1979, Bell worked first as a secretary and then as a waitress at a cafe in York Minster under supervision guidelines in efforts to prepare her for eventual release. 4 years after her release from custody, on May 25th, 1984, Bell gave birth to a daughter. This would prove to be her only child. Her daughter knew nothing of her mother's past until 1998. When reporters discovered Bell's then current location in a resort town on Sussex coast, where both had been living for approximately 18 months. This media revelation forced Bell and her 14-year-old daughter to leave their home and be driven to a safe house by undercover officers. Both mother and daughter later relocated to another part of the United Kingdom. So when she was released, 1980, age 23, that's when she was given a new name. She was granted that anonymity that we talked about before, allowing her to start that new life. Looks like, much like it would here in the U.S., the media found her and swooped in on her. I'm a little bothered that it was officers who took her to her undisclosed location, though. Bell was allegedly returned to Tyneside on several occasions in the years following her release. She's also alleged to have lived in this location at the time. The right to the anonymity granted to Bell's daughter following her birth was originally only extended until she reached the age of 18. However, May 21st, I should say, of 2003, Bell won a high court battle to have her own anonymity and that of her daughter extended for life. This order was approved by Dame Elizabeth Butler Sloss and was later updated to include Bell's granddaughter, who was born on January 2000. Isn't this just so nice? So nice what we're doing for child killers. In 1998, Bell collaborated with an author, Gitta Sereny, to provide an account of her life before and after her crimes for Sereny's 1998 book, Cries Unheard, The Story of Mary Bell. Within this book, Bell details the abuse she suffered as a child at the hands of her prostitute mother, and she alleges several of her mother's clients had also abused her. Others interviewed are relatives, friends, professionals who knew her before, during, and after her imprisonment. Bell's current whereabouts are unknown and remain protected by the 2003 High Court order. I'm sickened by that. I don't know about you. I am definitely sickened by it. According to Sidney, Bell does not claim she was wrongly convicted and freely admits the abuse she suffered as a child does not excuse her crimes. Well, I'm sorry that the girl or woman now, I'm sorry she ever got out. I'm sorry that she is able and has been able to live the life that she has lived. I'm sorry that she's not made to suffer. And her daughter didn't do anything at all. And so part of me is torn on I guess part of me is torn on the fact that her daughter and the granddaughter are able to live an anonymous life only because that is possible because the mother, Mary Bell, is able to live that same type of life. So I think that's what bothers me there. But yeah, this story really intrigued me when I first started looking for what I wanted to do this week. I landed on this and I said, I need to do this one here because I hadn't heard of the story. And it was really grotesque to me how this 11-year-old lured 2-3-year-old boys and strangled them with her bare hands. It's not easy to strangle someone, as anyone would tell you. That takes some time, even for a small child. But for one child to do it to another, to have that type of evil in you, I'm very shocked that they would set this little girl, who will turn to be a woman, set her free and say that she had served her times and let her move on with her life, and then rush her away when the media swoops in on them. I'm shocked by all of it. Not too much surprises me at this point, but I'm shocked by that. The story that you just heard me read here, or just watched me read, I sourced it from murderpedia.org, some of it from Wiki as well. I do thank you guys again for sitting back with me and listening, or sitting back with me and watching. Shout out to everyone out there, my murderous accomplices who listen each and every week. I just can't say this enough. Without you guys, again, I would just be talking to myself. So thank you guys very much. Remember, be aware of your surroundings, and I'll see you next week.